Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another Roscoe's recap, and this viewing party was for season 17 episode 5. And the guests this week were Suzie Toot and Carson Kressley. Today we're going to be talking about Suzie breaking her silence on what really happened with Hormona's rhinestones and whether Suzie also broke the rules. Carson spills backstage tea about how the show is filmed, and Suzie potentially exposes a guest judge from season 17 who apparently does not pay their drag performers. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. Also, thank you so much to everyone who subscribed. I'm getting ever closer to 120,000 subscribers, which is just so incredible. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, because it really helps, and I'd love to get to 120,000. Thank you. So they started off, and host Naysha Lopez mentioned that Suzie won the first challenge on the season and asked if she felt any pressure after that. Suzie said the design challenge was the first challenge after the talent shows, and she's not a designer, so she thought that it was going to be the storyline that a queen is in the top for the talent show, but then she goes home in the design challenge because, quote, she can't sew for bleep. But Suzie said that she did fiercely in the design challenge, so she then joked and said, quote, I'm here until the end, I'm going to win. Naysha then said she thinks that the queens all underestimated Suzie and asked if she agreed. Suzie said, quote, absolutely, and explained that it's happened to her before, and from her experience, queens usually don't expect much from her until they see her on stage. Also, Suzie said on the first episode she was at a very, quote, experimental period with her makeup, and her eyebrows were just, quote, wherever they wanted to be. So when she was doing her makeup for the entrance look, she decided to just, quote, go big, and she joked that, quote, my makeup looked how it did, and everyone laughed. However, later Suzie explained that she knew it was reality TV, so she was not going to get away with it, and she knew that her makeup style would come up at some point as a point of discussion, and she accepted that. However, the only thing that gagged her was when the show aired and she saw Michelle's comments that she made while the queens were in Untucked, and Michelle said that the Betty Boop style didn't work at all for Suzie. And Suzie was a bit gagged about that, presumably because she'd never actually heard Michelle say that before the episode aired. They then watched a bit more of the episode, and Caramel mentioned Lexi and brought up that a few episodes ago in the design challenge, Lexi was upset with Hormona Lisa because Hormona had used her own rhinestones on her outfit, which is against the rules, and Hormona was made to take them off. However, it then came out later on social media that Lexi had also called out Suzie for using her own stones, but it wasn't shown in the episode. And I did cover this in a previous Roscoe's recap, which I'll link to in the description if you want to check that out. And Caramel asked Suzie what really happened, and Suzie said that she would spill all the tea. Suzie explained that she had never heard the rule that you're not allowed to use your own rhinestones, and no one had ever told her that. Suzie then said that allegedly, Lexi and Hormona had found out about this rule at the same time, but Suzie said she's not sure if this is true, she just heard that that's true. So that night, Suzie took home her devil horns headpiece to her hotel room and stayed up rhinestoning it, because she still didn't know at that time that you weren't allowed to use your own stones. Then, the next morning, all of the queens would meet in the hotel corridor to go down the elevator together. Lexi apparently saw Suzie carrying the devil headpiece and asked her what it was, so Suzie explained that she had stoned it and said, quote, isn't it cool? Lexi then responded saying no, because I had to pull off this, that and whatever. Suzie didn't explain exactly what that meant, but it sounds like she was saying that Lexi must have also used her own stones on her own outfit, but then when she found out that you aren't allowed to use your own stones, she must have taken off the stones on her outfit, although this is just a guess based on what Suzie said. Then Suzie explained that for the design challenge, you get an hour before the cameras go up to do any last minute touches to your outfit. But during this time, there are no cameras rolling and the queens are just working on their outfits. It was during this time that Lexi called out Hormona for using her own stones, and then Hormona was made to remove the stones from her outfit. While this was happening, Jules Sparkles called Suzie over and quietly told Suzie that production was making Hormona remove the stones from her outfit. Jules then said to Suzie, quote, "Cover that bleep in glitter right now." So by the sounds of it, Jules was warning Suzie that she needed to cover the stones on her devil headpiece with glitter so that production wouldn't see that Suzie had used her own stones. Suzie then said that she didn't say a word and she just went right over to her station and covered her devil headpiece with red glitter, which is why you couldn't really tell that it was actually rhinestones. Carson then joked that he was calling production right now to inform them about this, and he said, quote, "We had a cheater," and everyone laughed. Suzie also said that the funniest part was that this issue was the biggest drama of the episode, but she, Hormona and Lexi were all safe, so it didn't actually matter. And when they were all back in Untucked together after being called safe, they all said to each other, quote, "We were being kind of crazy, weren't we?" Also, as some of you may have seen in my last Roscoe's recap, I mentioned some tea that happened outside of Roscoe's where Willem said on the Race Chaser podcast that apparently Hormona lied to production and said that someone from production had given her permission to use her own stones, but she was then apparently unable to point that person out and the others said that she was lying. And Willem also said the reason Suzie didn't have to take off her stones was because she didn't try and lie about it. So what Suzie said does somewhat line up with this, but by the sound of it, Suzie covered up the rhinestones and just didn't tell anyone, so this version of events is a bit different. Also, I noticed that an account that seems to belong to Hormona Lisa actually commented on my Roscoe's recap video last week and said, "Allegedly is the key word, lol, that is definitely not what happened." And I'm not sure what part of the story exactly Hormona was referring to, but I thought this was an interesting comment, so Hormona, if you're watching, please feel free to DM me if you have any details you'd like to share. But back to Roscoe's, and they then watched the part of the episode when the queens were getting ready for the RDR Live challenge this week. And Lexi was getting annoyed at Suzie because Suzie was shooting down all of Lexi's ideas, and Naysha asked if that was really how it happened. Suzie said that that was a, quote, fun version of what happened, presumably implying that perhaps it was slightly edited, although that's just a guess. Suzie explained that she knows she's going to sound annoying when she says this, but she's going to continue to be annoying. But she explained that she used to do a district theatre competition in high school, and she loves to direct, and was always helping people work on their scene and the structure of comedy. So Suzie apparently had addressed this with the others and asked if it was okay if she offered her advice, and both Suzie and Crystal had said yes and were, quote, very trusting and excited for that help. But she said it didn't quite read that way in the episode, and Suzie said that maybe Lexi really did feel that way, but Suzie said, quote, "But it was funny," and everyone laughed. They were then talking about something else, and Carson had made a joke that he's really old, and Suzie joked and said, quote, "Is anyone as old as Lexi Love in the building? Do we have queer elders in the building?" This is obviously a reference to the fact that a few episodes ago, the queens were making fun of Lexi for being old and calling her grandma because she was the oldest member of the cast at 33 at the time of filming. But afterwards on social media, some people were shocked about this and said how ridiculous it was that the queens were calling her old when she's only 33. And some people even accused the cast of being ageist because the rest of the cast is so young. And for example, Suzie is 24 years old and was born in April 2000. So the hosts at Roscoe's were saying that Lexi is not old and they are almost double Suzie's age. Suzie then said that she wanted to speak on this issue and explained that Lexi was the first person who called herself, quote, old and ancient and grandma doesn't understand anything. So the other queens of course just latched onto that because it's hilarious, but then they're the ones who then started getting called ageist. They then watched part of RDR Live, and Carson said he wanted to say something about the production side, because you often don't get to see all of that, but he wanted to commend production on what a great job they did, because when you're there, you're just filming on a green screen in a studio in the middle of the valley. But the production side made it look so great and they all worked so hard, and Carson is so proud to be part of such a well done program. Carson also said, quote, "The producers, they write all this stuff like literally in a camper the night before and it's so well done." And they all clapped for production. They then asked Suzie if this is her first time seeing RDR Live, or did they get to see it on set. Suzie said they did get to watch it, but it was a rough draft and it was semi-finished. Carson said that it's not the same, and what the judges get to see are usually just clips, but they don't have any background sound or the laugh effects, and it's very different to the end product. Naysha then said that on the RDR Live challenge that they did on All Stars 8, they got to do a rehearsal, but then the scenes they were only allowed to be filmed in one take as if it were live, and she asked Suzie if that was the case on season 17. Suzie said that they did have a rehearsal and then they filmed it in one take, but with her scene, something had, quote, messed up with the mics, so they did have to do a second take, but it was because of the mics, not because of them. Naysha then said the same thing happened on All Stars 8 with Candy Muse, and something had, quote, happened, and Naysha used her fingers to make air quotes when she said something happened, presumably inferring that she was being sarcastic and that's not actually true, and everyone gasped and laughed. Naysha then said that Candy got to do her bit a few times because, quote, something technical happened, but she said it in a very sarcastic way. Naysha then looked at the camera and jokingly said, quote, Candy, I love you, don't hit me. Naysha then asked Suzie if they got to watch each other's skits, but Suzie said no, and they filmed all of their scenes separately, and it was in a different order. But what Naysha meant was whether they actually got to use a teleprompter, and Suzie said yes, they had a teleprompter with their lines on it. The other host, Batty Davis, said that with the Beaver skit, you could see that they were just staring, looking at the teleprompter, whereas with the first group, because it was on an angle, you couldn't quite tell as much. Suzie clarified though that she had memorised her lines, so presumably she was saying that she didn't use the teleprompter. They then moved on, and Batty brought up that Suzie had previously worked with singer Chapel Roan, and Suzie once opened for one of Chapel's concerts, and she asked what that was like. Suzie explained that she worked with Chapel last November before Chapel's career blew up, and it was, quote, the coolest effing experience. Suzie said that Chapel paid the queens fiercely, she respected them and was excited to meet them. Then Suzie said, quote, other stars, who may or may not have been guest judges on Drag Race 17, maybe don't pay their drag queens. The audience then gasped, and Carson asked who, but Suzie laughed and pretended that she couldn't remember the name. Naysha then said, quote, wow, Katy Perry, and the audience screamed and everyone laughed. Suzie didn't confirm or deny, she just said, quote, sexy confident, which is the opening lyric to Katy's song Woman's World, which was the lip sync song on episode 1. Then Naysha said, quote, Katy, what the F? But she didn't say anything more about it. Now, I'm not 100% sure what Suzie was referring to, however I did find an article from 2017 where Vicky Vox, who is a well-known drag queen and was part of the band DWV with Willem and Detox, she accused Katy Perry's team of asking drag queens to perform in her music video for free. Apparently, at the time, Vicky had tweeted saying, here's a pop star begging drag queens to do a music video for 2 days with no pay, their own costumes and all. It wasn't until we said nope that they said maybe there might be some budget. Vicky apparently didn't name who it was at first, but then later tagged Katy Perry. And it looks like these tweets no longer exist, but multiple news outlets picked up on this story. So I assume Suzie was referring to Katy Perry in this instance, especially because Naysha also said her name, but this is just a guess. Caramel then mentioned that in this episode, Lexi had brought up that there were the so-called Kumbaya girls, who are the girls that you can't be fully shady with because they can't take a joke, and Cara asked Suzie about this. Suzie said that it had been a bit of a joke on set that there were the Kumbaya girls, and up until this very moment, Suzie thought that she was not part of the Kumbaya girls. However, they had just seen in the episode that Lexi named Suzie as, quote, captain of the Kumbaya girls. Carson then said it's sort of a compliment, but Suzie said, quote, well, no, and everyone laughed. Suzie explained that what it means to be a Kumbaya girl is you can't be fully shady with other queens and you, quote, can't be a drag queen. But Suzie said she was excited to see how that develops, and I assume she's referring to what happened in this week's Untucked, which we'll get onto later. They then got to the runway portion for this week, and Suzie shared that for her runway, Crystal had told her that she was going to do the bubblegum pop thing on the runway, and Suzie had originally planned to do something similar and pop the balloon and then walk the runway, but she didn't want to do the same thing as Crystal. So, luckily, Suzie had 2 balloons with her, just in case, and she blew up both of them and held them in her hands and looked in the mirror, and she realised that it actually looked cooler than what she had originally planned, so she changed her idea, and this all happened about 20 minutes before they filmed the runway. Also, just as a quick thing, at one point, Naysha asked Suzie who on the cast she is the closest to, and Suzie said Corey King. But the episode started again and they didn't talk about it any further, but I just thought this was an interesting tidbit. They then got to the part of the episode when Suzie won the challenge and everyone cheered for Suzie. Naysha then asked what it was like getting her second win. Suzie explained that the first time she won, the queens were really excited and cheered for her when she won, whereas this time when they announced Suzie won, all of the queens at the back were silent, and that's when Suzie realised that the others saw her as a threat. They then moved on to Untucked for this week, and there was a moment where many of the girls, particularly Lana, Arietti, Jules and Lexi, didn't seem to agree that Suzie should be in the top, and they said Suzie's look was not good, and Suzie clapped back at them.
There are other girls that barely did and they're safe.
But I could not see Suzie beating me in the top because she did not beat my outfit tonight.
So I'm gonna stop you. I do love you. Whether or not other drag queens think my look is chic or cool or fierce, that does not matter to me.
Cara said that Arietti had her moment, a bit like Aja when she said to Valentina, "You look like Linda Evangelista," and Suzie agreed and they all laughed.
I could come out in the blanket or a potato sack
Right.
and be like, oh, okay.
The hosts all praised Suzie for how she handled the situation and for standing up for herself, and they said that it was an iconic Untucked moment. Suzie then said that she was excited to come to Roscoe's and watch herself win the challenge, but she was even more excited to come and watch this moment of Untucked, and everyone laughed and cheered for Suzie. Carson then explained that it's not about who has the most fashionable outfit, it's about who is memorable and who showcases their brand of drag, which is why Suzie won. And he said, hopefully the other queens are watching this back and understand that, but then he said, quote, "I don't think that's going to happen." Naysha then asked if they think the runway actually matters. Carson said not very much. And Suzie said she thinks it can be used as a tiebreaker if 2 queens do equally well in the challenge, but that's it. They then discussed the levers for the Badunkadunk tank, and Naysha explained that they had previously said that they thought it was going to be levers 1 and 7 because it's season 17, and she asked Suzie if she had thought about it like that. Suzie said, quote, "All of us were convinced it was rigged, and whoever they wanted to save, they just decide and then use it." And so Suzie wasn't thinking about it like that at all, and she said that she would have actually pulled lever number 5 because it's her lucky number. Caramel then asked how long does it take after the lip sync for them to set up the Badunkadunk tank and for Michelle to get on. Carson said when he first saw the tank he thought it would take ages to set up, but actually he said it goes pretty quickly because Michelle already has her hair and makeup done, so all she needs to do is get into her bathing suit. And if she does get dunked, it's the end of the show and she doesn't have to go back into hair and makeup because that would add a lot of extra time. Suzie also said that as soon as they finish the lip sync, the PAs bring the levers onto the stage and Michelle is already getting ready to go onto the tank and it's actually really quick. Also, earlier at the viewing party, Carson had been asked if he or Ross Matthews had ever been considered for the tank, but Carson said no, it was always Michelle. They then moved on to the Q&A, and one of the questions was for Carson, which was, what does a day of filming look like for the judges? Carson said it depends on what they're doing that day and what the challenge is. Carson also said he's very lucky because it's the best gig in Hollywood. And he said, as a fun fact, there are these 3 trailers in a little trailer village, and they have a tent over it with a picnic table so they can eat. But as soon as Carson gets to set around 11 o'clock, he immediately goes to the guest judge's trailer to try and see who it is and see if he knows them. But usually it just has their initials on it, so he has to try and work out who it is. And for example, when it was Lady Gaga as the guest judge, it just said LG on the trailer. So Carson said he gets to set for around 11. The producers will then brief them on what the challenge is or what the runway category is. If there was an acting challenge and Carson was not there for it, he'll get to watch clips of it on an iPad so he can make notes. They then film the judges' walks and the hellos on the runway. Then it gets to about 2 o'clock, so it's lunchtime. And Carson joked that he doesn't eat for days beforehand just so he can go to craft service, which is where all the food is, and eat all of it for free. Carson said for lunch it's different every time, and sometimes they have food trucks or ice cream trucks that come, and he asked Suzie if they ever got that, and Suzie looked shocked and said no, and they all laughed. Carson said that after lunch they usually go back in around 4 p.m. and then maybe it's over by 7 p.m. and that's great, but other times they might be there until midnight or 1 a.m. It just depends how elaborate it is and if all the machines are working, so it's always different. And then finally, an audience member asked if they were able to steal anything from set. Suzie joked that being able to and whether they actually did are two different things, but Suzie said that she was actually very good compared to some of the other queens, and she took a few little things that they would give them for the challenges, but some queens on season 17 took lots of stuff. Carson asked what exactly they took and mentioned the Anastasia Beverly Hills makeup, but Suzie said that they give the queens those things to take anyway. Carson also mentioned the fabric wall, and Suzie said that Corey took a whole bolt of fabric that they gave them for the Monopoly Design Challenge, and Suzie said, quote, "When are you going to effing use that? She doesn't sew anything," and everyone laughed. They also asked Carson if he ever took anything from set, and Carson said as a judge there's not much you can take, but they do give them fans to use if they get hot, or to hold over their mouths if they want to be shady and cover up what they're saying. There are also some RuPaul breath mints, and also some sparkly pens which he occasionally takes, but that's it. And Suzie said she wishes she had taken one of the golden styrofoam heads, a bit like Hormona did, when she was there last week, and she gave them the bob wig that she wore in her confessional, and it was on a styrofoam head. So there you go, there was the Roscoe's recap for Season 17, Episode 5. Did you guess that it was going to be Levers 1 and 7? And did you like the Badunkadunk Tank twist? Let me know in the comments. If you'd like to get exclusive benefits such as early access to my videos and having your comment featured in my Have Your Say videos as well as many other benefits, please consider signing up to my Patreon. It just costs a few dollars a month, it really supports my channel and is such a huge lifeline to me and my channel, so please consider, and I'll put a link in the description. And I would just like to say thank you so much to my Patreon members. Your support is truly incredible. I am so humbled and so appreciative of all of your support. I really love seeing you have your say comments. I really love this community that I've built on Patreon. So thank you all so much for supporting me. It really does mean more than you know. If you liked this video, please make sure you like and comment on the video because it really helps boost the algorithm and tell YouTube to promote this to other people. And please make sure you subscribe because it really makes a huge difference to my channel. So hit that subscribe button now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll join me again for some future videos. Thank you, bye!